Welcome to History Walks with Daisy the Beagle and me, Dr. Charlie Rosier. Look at this building you can see behind us. It's Durham Cathedral. The Anglo-Norman building started in the 1090s and added to at various different points during the Middle Ages. The building's so amazing, Daisy can't take her eyes and our nose off it. In today's video, we're going to teach you about the life and the miracles of Cuthbert, whose body is buried in Durham Cathedral, died in the 7th century. We're going to teach you about the Norman Conquest, rebellion, rebuilding of the cathedral, and some later medieval events as well. Durham is a small city located in the northeast of England. It's got a recorded history dating back to the 990s. Surrounded by the River Wear on three sides, the centre has lots of shops, cafes and pubs. You also can't fail to spot university students in Durham. University is one of the biggest employers and around 15 to 20,000 students in any given year. Daisy has spent many an afternoon sitting in the Department of History, which you can see in this picture here, learning all there is to know about medieval Europe with boundless enthusiasm, as it's clear to see. So we're outside the east end of the cathedral, you can see behind us, and we're here because we're going to tell you about St Cuthbert. Cuthbert is the saint who is buried in Durham Cathedral. He was Bishop of Lindisfarne between 685 and 687, extremely long time before the cathedral was built. Cuthbert was revered in his own lifetime for his piety and his status as a hermit. After Cuthbert died, the monks of Lindisfarne were going to move his body 10 years later, and they discovered that it hadn't decayed at all, so he was declared a saint. The Northumbrian author Bede also wrote a biography of Cuthbert, listing more miracles and growing the cult of Cuthbert the saint. Cuthbert's community continued to grow after his death, receiving donations of land, money and so on the island of Lindisfarne. But in 793, disaster struck the island when it was attacked by Vikings in one of the first recorded Viking raids on mainland Britain. As with many events in this period, we don't have that many sources on what exactly happened, but we know that after that Viking raid into the 9th century, the community is still fairly prosperous with enough resources to sustain itself. 9th century, the history of northern England is dominated by Viking kingdoms and continued Viking conquests in that region, and so by the 880s, the community makes the bold decision to leave Lindisfarne and travel to further safety inland. The community travels around the north of England in this period, carrying Cuthbert's relics, showing off the relics like the body and the Lindisfarne Gospels and so on, and I think maintaining its power base in that region by showing people that they are still there and that people still need to pay their dues to their position in the region. Eventually the community settles at Chester Street, which is a few miles north of Durham, and establish themselves there for around 100 years. And then, we don't really know why, but in the 990s, again, the community moves, and the sources for that move are again quite complicated, but essentially what we know is that they travelled south to Ripon first, which is in North Yorkshire, and then they were on their way back to Lindisfarne when they came past Durham, and there are legends about experiencing a vision where the community had to settle in Durham from now on. And one of those legends involves a female cowherd who's immortalised on the cathedral behind me in this statue. Okay, so here we are in front of Durham Castle, which is now student accommodation belonging to the University of Durham. England was conquered by Normans in 1066, but it took them a few years to make their way up to the north of England. It's a situation of rebellions all over the country, really, and the north was particularly independent thinking. In 1069, an individual called Robert Cumin was appointed as Earl of Northumbria, and he travelled up to the north with an army. Robert's army arrived in Durham. The bishop warned him that the locals were going to rebel, but Robert didn't heed the warning and his army were all killed, including himself. After that event, it was decided that Durham needed to be a little bit more secure, so the castle that you can see behind me started to be built, This version is a little bit later than that, much of it bearing the marks of 19th century reconstructions. But under normal circumstances, outside of coronavirus, you can pay for a castle tour in which you can see the oldest foundations of the castle dating back to the 1070s, and it's really, really worth a go. So here we are outside the Anglo-Norman Cathedral. You can see behind me on quite a windy day, in case my camera is moving about. There's quite a lot of wind in the air. You can see Daisy's ears. It's affecting her too. So after the 1070s and the construction of Durham Castle, disquiet rumbles on in the northeast, and in 1080 the Bishop of Durham, who's called William Wowshire, is killed in a rebellion just outside Gateshead. William the Conqueror needs a new strategy in the northeast, so he decides to appoint a genius administrator by the name of Bishop William of St. Calais. When Bishop William arrived, his kind of genius masterstroke was to embark on a Benedictine reform of the Durham community. Bishop William imported monks from elsewhere in England, but also from Normandy, and he also brought books and gave the intellectual resources to this new community. Also, William decided to rebuild the cathedral that you can see behind me. The previous Anglo-Saxon building, a rather large church just referred to in the sources as the White Church, not really any other description, was knocked down, and this new edifice that you can see behind me was built in its place, making quite a statement. Beginning at the east end with Cuthbert's Shrine, complete by 1104, and moving gradually further west, the bulk of Durham Cathedral was built between 1093 and completed by around the 1130s. The scale of the cathedral is immediate when you get up close to it, and look at the Romanesque architecture, these characteristic round, heavy arches, and when you go inside, the Romanesque heavy columns make a huge impression on the viewer. There are various events that we could explore in the later medieval history of Durham, such as the Battle of Neville's Cross in the 14th century, and the dissolution of the monasteries in the 16th century, for which monastic historians like me are very sad. But the main hand that you can see present in this area of Durham at the moment is John Cousin, who's Bishop of Durham in the 17th century, embarks on a mass rebuilding programme of Palace Green, the castle, and Bishop Auckland Palace, which is his palace outside of Durham. One of the things I like most about Durham as a city is how green it is, and much of that is due to the fact that these riverbank paths are maintained by the Dean and Chapter of the Cathedral, and you can walk pretty much around the whole of the city along these riverbanks. Daisy's had such a busy day in Durham, I think she's going to sleep all the way home to Suffolk. If you enjoyed our visit to Durham as much as Daisy did, then subscribe to our YouTube channel for updates on when we make our next video. Give us a like on Instagram and on Twitter, and you'll get updates on where we're going next and what we're about to do, and you'll be able to catch up with us for our future history walks. We'll see you soon for another episode. It's bye from me, and it's bye from a very, very sleepy Daisy in the back of the car. See you soon, and thanks for watching. When the Anglo-Norman Cathedral, but in the 9th century,